The ground beneath Jesus' tomb in Jerusalem has never been fully excavated. Beneath the marble floor, hidden beneath centuries of construction, something awaited. A sealed chamber that shouldn't have existed. Evidence of burial methods that matched a very specific timeline. And physical marks that have left scientists struggling to explain what they're seeing. Church officials moved swiftly to restrict access. Experts who examined the findings are now divided, some calling it the most important archaeological evidence in biblical history, while others warn that the findings are deeply disturbing. What lies beneath Jesus' tomb isn't just changing the history books, it's raising questions no one is prepared to answer. Hit like and subscribe to see the evidence they found. Breaking centuries of silence. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre has operated for centuries under strict protocols. Greek Orthodox, Roman Catholic, and Armenian Apostolic groups share custody, and any structural work requires agreement from all three. This arrangement has kept the area beneath the tomb largely unexplored for generations. Everything shifted in 2022 when engineers detected unusual movements in the marble surrounding the edicule, the ornate structure encasing Christ's presumed resting place. Initial observations seemed unremarkable, but deeper analysis revealed alarming subsidence in certain areas. Structural assessments indicated that portions of the floor were settling into deteriorated fill material, compacted debris from nearly 2 millennia of continuous construction layered atop itself. The engineers issued a stark warning. Continued neglect could result in permanent harm to this supremely important Christian landmark. Their assessment forced an unprecedented collaboration. Despite their historical reluctance to agree on modifications, the three custodial groups reached a fragile consensus. Scientific examination would proceed, but under intense scrutiny, with each denomination appointing monitors to observe every movement near the tomb. The work environment transformed completely. Specialists operated in profound silence, conscious that they were accessing spaces forbidden to outsiders for countless generations. When the archaeological team arrived, their parameters were explicitly defined. They could examine only the area directly beneath the marble near the edicule, working within a compressed time frame and rigid spatial limits. Still, the chance was unprecedented. Modern scientific methods had never penetrated these deeper strata. The team proceeded with extreme care, balancing the need for structural data against the imperative to preserve everything sacred. Ground-penetrating radar became their first investigative tool. As the scanner swept across the marble, transmitting waves into the depths below, the returning signals created patterns that startled the technicians. The bedrock beneath wasn't uniform or level, as anticipated. Instead, it revealed an irregular surface with valleys and peaks inconsistent with stable foundations. Early reports suggested the echoes indicated hollow spaces or chambers that had remained undisturbed for centuries. While premature to draw conclusions, the scans strongly suggested hidden features existed below the visible floor. Microarchaeology experts readied their sampling equipment in case approval came for deeper exploration. Their initial authorization covered only examination of loose material and sediment once the marble was lifted, limited access that still offered opportunities to analyze pollen, soil composition, and mineral accumulation that might illuminate the site's history. Unveiling ancient layers. When workers finally removed the first marble section, they braced themselves to find typical restoration materials from previous repair campaigns. After all, the Holy Sepulchre had undergone countless patches, resurfacing, and reinforcements over the centuries. discovering modern mortar and construction refuse would have been entirely expected. Instead, the moment they lifted that layer, everyone froze. Beneath the marble sat compressed earth, far more ancient than anyone had anticipated, dense, stratified, and showing no evidence of recent interference. The researchers immediately recognized this wasn't maintenance material at all. This was a primordial surface, sealed away beneath successive generations of reconstruction. What they'd opened wasn't a repair zone. It was a direct portal into the location's earliest existence. The team began carefully removing the exposed strata, anticipating ordinary fill from various restoration periods. What they uncovered instead was a distinct and orderly timeline of historical deposits. The uppermost layer was easily identified. Beneath the contemporary paving lay 20th century leveling cement from earlier restoration projects, a practical layer demonstrating how frequently the site required attention. Below that emerged fragments of Byzantine stonework from the 4th century, originating from Constantine's reconstruction, confirming that a formal sanctuary existed here long before medieval construction. The subsequent layer carried weightier historical significance. Workers reached compressed rubble connected to a 2nd century Roman initiative. Records associated this debris with Hadrian's campaign to establish a pagan temple at the location. The fill was compact and homogeneous, as though previous structures had been systematically leveled before new building commenced. The true surprise materialized below the Roman stratum. The soil transitioned from construction debris to unmistakable quarry residue, fine powder, stone fragments, and packing sediment indicating active limestone extraction during the 1st century. Multiple pottery shards discovered in this layer matched forms commonly dated before 70 CE. Initial analysis suggested the ground had functioned as an operational quarry rather than merely open terrain. Ground-penetrating radar validated the discovery. The subsurface configuration sloped in patterns matching quarry excavations documented elsewhere in Jerusalem. Geophysical experts reported that the deposit formations reflected intentional stone removal rather than natural weathering processes. Soil chemistry verified the chronological sequence. Each cultural layer contained distinctive mineral and organic markers that hadn't intermixed, indicating the site had remained stable across centuries, preserving the layers intact. A crucial detail amplified the significance. The boundaries identified by radar matched reconstructions of 1st century municipal limits. The garden that shouldn't exist. When the team reached the layer beneath the Roman destruction debris, they anticipated more quarry dust and fragmented stone. Instead, they discovered pockets of dark, nutrient-rich soil that had no business existing in a quarry. The texture and coloration differed completely from the rocky material above it, raising immediate questions, because such soil appears only when people deliberately introduce garden earth to locations where natural growth would be impossible. The first significant clue emerged from pollen examination. Laboratory analysis identified preserved grains from olive and grape cultivation, domesticated species, not wild varieties. These matched plants that 1st century Jerusalem households typically grew in small managed gardens. Multiple researchers noted this was particularly significant because Gospel accounts explicitly stated the tomb was situated within a garden. The cultivated pollen presence suggested this wasn't an abandoned quarry at that time. It had been an actively maintained garden space, tended by someone in the vicinity. The second critical clue appeared when removing the soil exposed the underlying bedrock. Carved into the stone were shallow planting beds, arranged in a simple, organized configuration. too deliberate to be natural depressions. Preliminary notes indicated these beds matched typical small garden plots often found near first-century Jewish tombs, where families cultivated plants during visits. These discoveries redirected the investigation entirely. The soil proved the ground above the next layer had been a maintained garden during the 1st century. The carved beds demonstrated someone cared for the space systematically. Together, they raised an unavoidable question. If a garden existed here at precisely that time, what lay beneath it? The chamber takes shape. The first exposed surface appeared flat and shaped with deliberate precision. Not natural stone or a rough extraction scar, but a cut ledge. When light illuminated it, several archaeologists moved closer immediately. The ledge maintained consistent height, with a smooth surface displaying controlled craftsmanship. It was a burial bench, identical to those used in 1st-century Jewish tombs throughout Jerusalem. During that era, burial benches served specific purposes. Families placed the body on the bench immediately after death for washing, preparation, and spice application. This bench followed that pattern precisely. Its height, surface finish, and overall form matched examples catalogued in documented 1st-century tombs around the city. Nothing suggested later addition. It belonged to the earliest stage of burial practice. As excavation widened, a second bench appeared beside the first, soon followed by a third. All three displayed identical chisel rhythms, marks moving in controlled arcs, matching trained stonecutters' work rather than general laborers. The benches formed a sequence reflecting planning, not improvisation. Field notes suggested their uniformity indicated this chamber had been designed as a multi-person family tomb rather than a single burial. A striking detail emerged when the team cleared rubble to the east. Beneath the debris was a narrow vertical shaft, small initially, but unmistakable once loose stone was removed. It was a cock, a deep burial niche cut into the bedrock. These niches held bodies after initial bench preparation. The presence of both benches and a coke confirmed they were inside a complete burial system, not a partial structure. The workmanship provided additional clarity. Tool marks shaping the benches, and coke matched 1st-century carving techniques, showing consistent pressure and angle. Conservators inspected the chamber for medieval alterations or later intrusion, but found none. The stone surfaces were original, showing no evidence of later reworking. One feature stood out prominently. On the west wall, a niche had been started, but never completed. The carving stopped abruptly mid-cut. Some researchers believe this may indicate a sudden construction halt, possibly caused by an unexpected event or rushed burial timeline. Fragments of the past. Once the benches and coke were fully documented, the next step involved examining the chamber floor and small crevices carved into stone. With the tomb sealed beneath later construction for centuries, the likelihood of any biological material surviving seemed minimal. Nevertheless, technicians prepared their sampling instruments meticulously, determined to overlook nothing. The first unusual detail surfaced when a narrow groove between two benches was vacuumed with a micro-extraction tube. Trapped against the stone at the groove's bottom was a cluster of minuscule fibers, faint, nearly invisible, yet holding a texture inconsistent with mineral dust. When transferred into a sealed vial, one specialist paused. The material didn't crumble like plant matter or sweep away like environmental debris. It clung to the tool in a manner suggesting woven origin. Laboratory magnification revealed a clear weave pattern far finer than anything natural processes produce. The first technical report indicated the fibers possessed the twisted structure of ancient linen, immediately creating debate. Linen is delicate and degrades rapidly in open environments. Finding it intact in any form inside such an old chamber was unexpected. Additional samples from the bench edges yielded more fibers with similar size and structure, again showing woven characteristics. Analysts concluded the fibers were too consistent to be accidental or intrusive. Something textile-related had once rested on the stone surface. One sample carried an even stronger indicator. Embedded within a fragment was microscopic residue suggesting contact with oils. Not modern oils, but a chemical breakdown pattern associated with ancient burial ointments. While researchers emphasized the finding remained preliminary and required further validation, the lab noted that linen soaked with aromatic preparations was an established component of 1st century Jewish burial rites. The hidden chamber. The team had already exposed 1st century tomb benches and burial linen traces, but nothing compared to what awaited beneath the limestone slab believed to mark Christ's traditional burial location. Ground-penetrating radar specialists began their passes expecting ordinary bedrock. For several minutes, readings remained flat. Then the monitor displayed a shape no one anticipated, a clean rectangular void directly beneath the slab with even edges and consistent depth. It appeared sealed and purposeful. Technicians repeated the scan to eliminate interference. The void reappeared, sharper than before. Internal notes indicated the size matched a small room, yet no historical map or document mentioned anything beneath this point. If a chamber existed here, it had been concealed for nearly 2 millennia. Because the slab couldn't be removed, the team searched for the smallest possible entry point. A natural fissure ran along the bedding stone. After extensive discussion, a micro camera was guided through the opening. The screen went black, then focused. The reaction was immediate. The chamber was intact. Undisturbed dust covered the floor. Walls showed no signs of later repairs or intrusion. Nothing inside had been touched. The camera moved toward the center, revealing a flat limestone bench with simple carved lines used in 1st century burial preparation. Not Christian symbols from later centuries, but matching the earliest phase of Jewish burial practice. Through the small opening, the team extracted trace samples from the bench using vacuum tubing. Laboratory reports later confirmed microscopic fibers consistent with ancient linen, the same type found in the upper tomb benches, but concentrated here in a single location. Specialists indicated this suggested a body wrapped in linen had once rested on the stone. A small carved niche in the wall added another dimension, matching the shape of short-term preparation spaces used during 1st century burial rituals. The niche was empty except for faint discoloration, as if an object or vessel had once sat there before the chamber was sealed. Mineral buildup on the walls provided final confirmation. Geochemical readings showed the crust had formed in a closed environment, with no signs of movement, cracks, or later entry. If the analysis proved correct, the chamber had been sealed soon after the 1st century and never reopened since. The aftermath. The implications divided the team. Some researchers argued the chamber fit early descriptions of Christ's original burial place before later construction reshaped the site. Others insisted the evidence was insufficient for direct identification. Internal accounts described the debates becoming heated. A few scholars maintained that if the chamber truly dated to the 1st century and held signs of a wrapped body placed briefly then removed, it matched the timeline recorded in the Gospels. Opponents countered that this interpretation was premature and carried enormous consequences. When word of the chamber spread beyond the immediate team, the excavation's quiet atmosphere shattered. Scientific committees, religious authorities, and international institutions demanded access. Heated exchanges erupted over ownership, interpretation, and control. Senior archaeologists urged caution, arguing the evidence required more verification before connecting it to a specific historical figure. Religious custodians feared unrestricted access would lead to misinterpretation or sensational claims, demanding limited entry until proper oversight could be established. Historians specializing in early Christianity took firmer positions. Many believed the discoveries supported traditions modern skeptics had dismissed, arguing the physical evidence restored credibility to accounts long treated as symbolic. Their statements circulated widely, intensifying the debate. Material scientists added their perspective, pointing to sealing mineral composition inside the chamber. Laboratory reports showed patterns consistent with first-century formation, with no detectable later disturbance, supporting the claim the chamber had remained closed since antiquity. The discovery continues to generate intense discussion among scholars, religious leaders, and the public, with each new analysis adding layers to one of archaeology's most compelling mysteries.